I know it sounds probably odd that I went from healthcare into finances, but the more I'm in there, the more I'm realizing like, oh, I can take care of the whole family, right? Like I'm not
Right.
just looking at somebody's their dollar balance or whatever. Like I can really just like get to know people and help them through a job loss or a spouse loss or just like these really big scary moments, and I can take care of the whole family. Like that's what I want to do.
Hi, I'm Megan Heritage, and this is the Positivity in Practice podcast. And today we're here with Stephanie Greene. She is a financial advisor. Hi,
Yes. Hi,
Stephanie.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to
Good.
have you
Me
here.
too.
Pardon my super raspy voice.
It's totally fine.
I know the littles bring you home the things, and then we
Uh-huh.
have them for weeks, and
Uh-huh.
then they're done with them in 3 days.
My
So,
5-year-old woke up and he's like, I've got a frog in my throat, which is how he
oh, I
that's
love
his.
that.
So we've got lots of frogs in the throats at home.
So I was thinking about this. I don't know how long I have known you. I feel like I've known you
Well,
forever.
so you sold my husband and I our first house. And I remember when I found you online, I'm like, oh, she deals with like big, like $1 million homes. My husband and I were not in the position. And I remember sitting down with you in your space downstairs. And you're like, oh, I love first time home buyers. And like, that's really where my heart is. And I just kind of like, I, that one, I like that one, meaning you, like, I like that woman. And
Mm.
then I just kind of stalked you ever since. And sort of, I went to that B
Yep.
event a couple of years ago after my second was born. And I'm like, I just want to get to know you better. And so we met up for, I think it was lunch, right?
Yeah.
And then we just kind of been friends ever since.
Yeah. I obviously I remember, shopping with you guys and doing all of that. And then it honestly it got sideways kind of
A
when
little bit.
you made the
Yeah.
decision that you guys were going to buy your parents' house, and then your parents became my clients
Mm-hmm.
and we sold them an amazing house.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then remember, like you sold my best friend's a house,
I
and
did.
then their parents a house.
Yeah.
So you're like our go-to.
Well, and your your bestie, one of my favorite stories is it was a snowstorm and she had a tiny little
Yeah.
baby. And I knew the seller of the house that we were looking at, and she was gonna nurse in the car.
Yes.
A and
You're
I
like,
was
no,
like, "No,
go upstairs.
no, that's actually not how we do things in West
Yeah.
Michigan."
I
So I
love it.
texted the seller, and the seller, was like, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is the chair that I rock my babies in and
Oh.
totally nurse in that chair." And it
Yeah.
was, yeah, there's just an amazing, amazing story. You did something super smart. So when you were at the B event, I had said, "If I can be a value to you in any way," to the entire audience, which was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women,
Mm-hmm.
um, "Please just call me up."
It's like, I'm going to shoot my shot with this one. Do you remember you told that story about you were in LA and there was that homeless man sitting outside of a Starbucks?
Yeah.
And you had said, can I get you something? And you were thinking he would just want like a sandwich and coffee. And he goes, no, I want a caramel macchiato. Like he went for it. And do you
Yeah.
remember that's what I titled my email? It's like, this is my caramel macchiato moment. Can
I
I sit down
do.
with you and have lunch?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. And I remember thinking, so I was in Los Angeles, at a speaking engagement. I was there with Dr. Tabitha Barber, and I was popping up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And the only people that were at Starbucks were homeless people
Yeah.
and cops. And I drank a black coffee with a splash of cream. So my coffee was like $2.75 or something.
Yeah.
And this guy's like, grande. I
Take
want
that
the
and
whole
double
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
But what an amazing, what an amazing like story to be able to be like, you know what? I said, would you like a coffee this morning? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, I
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
And then you took that and rolled it into essentially, I want to meet with you on a monthly basis and, just chat. And I wanted to do that so badly. And
Yeah.
I also remember having this sort of point of vulnerability where I was like, gosh, I don't know what value I can provide in
Yeah.
totality, right?
Yeah, and you sit down and you're like, I'm just gonna let you know right off the bat, my life is a mess. And I was like, oh, perfect, mine too. And I just
Right.
remember like, okay, great. She like is getting it done. She's got family and she's making it happen. And if her life is a little messy, mine, okay, I can do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was actually an encouraging thing when you were just meant to be completely honest. And it was like, all right, I can do
Well,
this too.
and I love that, you have 2 sons, I have 2 sons. Obviously, yours are tiny. How old are they?
Sawyer is 5 and Jack is 2.
Yeah. So I've
They're
got
babies.
14 and 11. And I remember that time in my life and just thinking, almost chronically that I was some kind of failure
Mhm.
because never in a singular day was I able to be the best broker, the best leader, the best realtor, the best wife, the best
Yeah.
mom, fit in my workout, do my meditation, be
Yep.
in the word, do all of this stuff. And there was a woman named Kay Bush who essentially, said to me, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once.
Yeah. That's so
And
true.
that's when I sort of decided this idea of like balance in a day is baloney.
Yep.
Um, but balance over a lifetime is completely attainable.
Mhm. Yeah.
So tell me, I know that you were a nurse before,
Yeah.
and tell me how you are always a nurse, I
Once a
guess,
nurse, always a nurse.
right?
Yep.
So how do we go from being a nurse to being a financial advisor?
That's a complete shift. But although the more that I talk about this transition, the more I realize like, no, they're kind of like the two are actually married, right?
Mhm,
So I went to nursing school. That was going to be like my end all be all. I loved like taking care of the whole person, right?
mhm,
Because you can't just like fix someone physically if like spiritually or mentally they're struggling. It's not going to be enough, right? So I remember I was on a stroke unit and working the night shift. And at that point, like if you need an MRI and the MRI machine is open, you send your patient down. So it's the middle of the night. This husband, he completely lost all mobility and feeling in his left side. So he's scared. I'm sending him down to an MRI, and his wife is at the bedside, like in the dark, just complete, like she doesn't know what's going on. She's just totally scared. And she asked me, she's like, Stephanie, do you believe in Jesus? I'm like,
mm,
I do. She goes, oh, would you mind praying with me? I'm like, this is why I went to nursing, right? Like, I'm helping the husband. The wife is struggling. Like, absolutely. That was such an honor to me. And so I never want to push Jesus on people, but if they, heavens, absolutely. So I sat down with her and I prayed, and it was such like a powerful moment. And I was like riding this total high of like, I'm really making a difference. What I felt like I was making a difference. And I remember going to my nurse manager and I was telling her the story, and she's like, "Can't pray with patients."
mm.
I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" She goes, "No, no, this is not XYZ hospital. Like, you can't pray with patients here." And I'm like, this isn't going to work for me, right? And so I just have over the next couple of years working as a nurse, I just have unfortunately too many stories of like almost a corporation getting in the way of the heart of nursing. And as I'm going through like my financial practice and talking with other RNs, they're like, yeah, it's really getting to the point where like you can't fully care for the patient or their
Mhm.
family. And I'm like, well, that's not what I went into this career for. And so I did a ton of soul searching, and I know it sounds probably odd that I went from healthcare into finances, but the more I'm in there, the more I'm realizing like, oh, I can take care of the whole family, right? Like I'm not
Right.
just looking at somebody's their dollar balance or whatever. Like I can really just like get to know people and help them through a job loss or a spouse loss or just like these really big scary moments, and I can take care of the whole family. I'm like that's what I want to do.
I love that.
Yeah, so it's been an incredibly honoring, humbling transition. It's been really cool.
I feel all of that so much because obviously I was a teacher and now I
Mhm.
sell real estate. And my mom will often say, are you mad that you waited tables in order to get that graduate degree? And, I paid cash for that and was working full time as a teacher and doing all of these different things
Yeah.
in order to get that degree. But I really feel like in the end, it all comes down to education and listening
Mhm. Yeah.
in real estate too, right? Like
Yep.
it all starts with math and people's dreams and goals and aspirations. And we only have two ways to build net worth. It's either make more or spend less,
Mhm.
and usually both. Try
Yep.
to make more and spend less. Tell me a little bit about your day to day, what you do inside.
It changes so much day to day. So in our practice, so we really look more at like the whole entire plan.
Hmm.
So I'm not just looking at like certain investments or like a certain insurance product. Like it's the whole gamut of that. And so my day can start as simple as like having an annual review with the client, but then maybe a question pops up and I'll do my research and come back to it. Or I'll have somebody come in and say, hey, my wife just got diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's. We want to go on a trip. Can we make it work? And
Sorry, I made a loud noise with my coffee.
That's fine. And I truthfully, that for me is what I love the most is when people say, "Hey, I've always wanted to go like on this bucket list trip," or "This is happening with my family. Do I have the resources?" And I'm like, well, I'm gonna get my calculator and so like it might start just with a bunch of appointments, but it always, I would say, like blossoms into more than that because again, like we're taking care of the whole family, and there's so much more. I would say like personal. I don't know. There's just so much more personality and personal components to it than people I think realize.
Well, and what you're really doing is helping people to plan for their dreams, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I saw, especially when I was building, please tell me that I'm not clipping all the coupons and finding all of the deals and all of those things so that someday when I'm, 70, I can't get the $500 pot
Yeah.
filler, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I see a little bit of it's interesting to me because I have a lot of clients who are in their 60s and have done everything right.
Mhm.
And then they get in this weird space where they're afraid to spend.
Yes. I get that all the time.
Yeah,
And I always ask people, I'm like, what is your purpose for some people, like their end all be all is to give it to their kids. And
right.
that's like, we fully
Yeah, that's
support
not
that.
mine.
No. Then for a lot of these people, I'm like, oh my gosh, your blood, sweat, and tears went into getting this pot of money.
Mhm.
What's important to you, right? Like, how do you want to spend this? How do you not want to spend it? And I get a lot of clients because I think they've gone through all their years of like scrimping and saving and clipping the coupons and putting the money away.
Right.
And then when they retire, they're like, well, I can't touch it. And I'm like, oh, yes, you can. Like, let's figure it out, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's the coolest part for me is helping people spend their money
Yeah,
wisely, right?
wisely, right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
read a book, a dentist actually out of the Ann Arbor area who was a client gave me, a book called Die with Zero,
Hmm.
and it was such an interesting read
Yeah.
because I felt like it was finally putting me in a position. They tell a story about, a man who, like, his dream was to, be all over Europe and, go to Egypt and see the pyramids and do all these different things, and by the time he retired, his health wasn't in
Yeah.
a and so he had all of this money and wasn't able to actualize what he wanted to do because
Hmm.
he had waited too long to do the things that made sense, prior. And I think that that is, obviously fear,
Yep.
right? Fear of scarcity. How do you help people overcome that? Like, how do you help them with that balance of like, it's
Yeah.
okay to live life and
Yeah.
still be safe, I guess?
I think we look at like at this one page sheet that it has, and that's the thing. My industry loves paper. Like
Yeah.
the more paper, the shinier, the better. And like that does not communicate to people. So we got this one page sheet and it lists like, here is your retirement assets. What's your social security? Like, what's your pension? What do you want? So it kind of gives people like a guideline or sort of like an estimation of, okay, if I spend this much, how long is my nest egg going to last? Right. And whenever I'm putting together these projections, I'm a negative kind of person in that sense. Like,
Sure.
I don't want to inflate the numbers. I don't want to blow smoke. Like, let's stress test your budget. Let's stress test all the things. So when I have a client that's coming to me and they're like, hey, I want to buy this condo in Florida. It's always been a dream of ours and want to pay cash for it.
Mhm.
I had this happen actually. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not a CPA, but from a tax perspective, might not be the wisest, but this is your dream. Let's figure it out. So I'll go to that one page sheet and I'll look at their nest egg. And if they're going to spend X thousands of dollars, I'll act as if that money doesn't even exist.
Mhm.
And we'll see how it plays into the rest of their calculations. And so when I have these clients that want to go on that safari trip in Africa, right,
Right.
I'll act as if that money doesn't even exist and how does it impact their whole plan? And then it's so funny how that one sheet gives people permission to spend.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. And for some of these, a lot of our clients, like it doesn't, that $10,000, $20,000 trip, it doesn't matter as far as
Right.
like their retirement. And so I think like that's what I love so much about, I think the way that we've built out our practice is that I'm looking at all the angles of all the money plus pulling in like, again, what do they want to accomplish?
Yeah.
Right. And like, it's not just one singular area in their life, it's all of it.
I've seen this a couple of times now too, just because of how expensive homes are,
Mhm.
and have looked at this inside of my own planning, you know, watching people almost prepay inheritance.
Yeah.
And so they were planning on leaving a grandchild XYZ or PYQ. And instead of waiting until they pass, they're offering up those dollars in a down payment, or they're offering
Yeah.
up those dollars in closing costs, so that they can actually see what the benefit of their gift is.
Yeah. And we call that, instead of giving it with a cold hand, giving it with a warm hand. And like, so for some of those, it's like the trips or the down payment or like those memories with their grandkids. Like that's where life is at.
I know. And I love the idea of getting to see it, right?
Mhm.
Like I lost my dad and he's not getting to see. Well, I hope he's getting to
He's getting to
see.
He is getting to see.
Um, everything, in front of us that he's actually benefacted into.
Mhm.
I took my kids on a trip to Canada, and it was like a
Mm.
5-day yes day. Like
Yeah.
it was just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yep.
that was all his money.
Yeah.
And you want to go bowling, go to Ripley's Museum, go on the Maid of the Mist, do
Go to Tim
everything.
Hortons, like, no.
All of it. Yes,
Could go
absolutely.
crazy, right?
That's actually really funny. My dad loved Tim Hortons.
I remember you
And
telling me that, yeah.
every time a nurse or a doctor showed up, they had a cup of Tim Hortons. I was the most caffeinated grieving person
Oh, I bet.
in the whole world.
Yeah.
So tell me what the biggest challenge is when you're dealing with clients.
I think the biggest challenge that I see is people come into our office with, I would say, unrealistic expectations that have been set by somebody else. In my industry, there's a lot of, and I don't think it's exclusive just to my industry, but I think that there's a lot of big talkers. And you get these people in positions that they talk big, they're setting unrealistic expectations for the client, and then those expectations cannot be met, right? And so then you get a client that's like, well, so-and-so told me XYZ, it never came to fruition. I now have a distrust of the industry, right? And I think that again, that happens with so many other areas. It's not exclusive to mine. So I think I'll have a client come in and there is just a hesitancy. There's this thought of like, well, I've been sold a product before and not a plan. And it's been unreal, like the expectations have been unrealistic, and I'm not sure how to handle that. So, right. So I think it's probably the same for you. Like there's distrust that truthfully, some of it is well deserved, right?
Right.
From others,
Yeah.
it's well deserved. And so I think the biggest thing for me is just trying to get people to realize and to understand that maybe you've been sold a product before or you've been focused on that, but we need to focus on the plan. That's the most important thing.
Right.
And it can be a paradigm shift for some people. Because again, I just think that there's so much in this area of just, well, this perfect investment will fix everything.
Yeah.
And surprise, it doesn't. Like that's not nearly enough for what these people
It's
need.
so hard too when I was with somebody yesterday and at a listing appointment, they were talking about everything that went wrong, and and you want to be like, yeah, that wasn't me, right? It's
Right.
almost like a relationship where you were cheated on by your last boyfriend, and then
that's so
the
true.
person is expecting that now you're a cheater, and you're like, yeah, I'm not that guy.
I know. And you don't want to like sling mud at the one before, right? Like I don't
No,
want to
never.
spend any time going over why this person did X, Y,
Well, I
Z.
don't know if that was the market. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I don't know anything about that. All I want to do is like listen and then start fresh with what the new plan is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when people come in that fearful space and you are able to talk about the new plan,
Mm-hmm.
what is the biggest joy when it has to be really, really joyful when it starts to work.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I think like I focus I want the relation, right? That's the nurse in me. Like I want a relationship with this person. And so when you're building that relationship, I didn't get married to my husband after 2 dates, right? Like it takes time. And so for me, the biggest reward is after you have a couple of those sessions and they really get to know you and they start to realize like, oh, this is not about this. This is now a plan. This is my person. It's more of a coaching session. Like I always tell my clients, like, I'm not going to dictate your money. I'm going to advise you. This is your money.
Right.
Well, let's work on this together. And so I think that's the biggest reward for me is when we get to that point where I'm like, oh, this is a relationship. Like we're coaching. I'm their person. I'm helping them, and they feel that trust. That's the most joy for me.
Well, and I think I mean, we worked like all cash principals for years and years and years. It can almost become like a game.
Mm.
Like, you almost get, like, a dopamine hit
Yeah.
once you get to the point where you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna save XYZ and PYQ."
Mhm.
And I know Simon Sinek wrote the book, like, "What's your why?"
Yeah.
But I feel like in my life, it's been, "Who is my why?"
Yeah.
And so when I started to look at, like, okay, this much money over the course of PYQ affords my kids the opportunity to be able to go to the kind of college that, they wanna go to, or if I can pay my house off
Yeah.
by this time, or that sort of delayed gratification,
Mhm.
and then these really big wins for you financially. I love The Millionaire Next Door because somewhere in the book, and I'm gonna misquote it, but it says, "Live like you don't want to right now so that you can live
Yeah.
like most people can't later."
Yep.
And the first guy that I sold $1 million lot to, like, his flip-flop was tied up with duct tape, and he was driving an old minivan.
They
It
always do.
Yeah.
Those millionaires always do.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
gave me that book and was like, "You're gonna be okay, kiddo, like,
Yeah.
it's all gonna be fine." But I feel like if people could get to the point where they would just be honest about the reason that they're spending or the financial situation that they're in, and then start to rebuild in that space
Mhm.
and recognize, like, there is a real, like, serotonin booster here that
Yeah.
comes from driving into your own goals, especially when you have a coach.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just that's the so cool for me is, like, again, I talked about that couple wanted to buy a condo in Florida, like, that was their goal,
Right.
and they did the work, I was just able to coach them there, and that's so cool. And that happened a few years ago, and I still bring it up because, like, that's my hit, right?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
dopamine
we
hit.
just said that in a podcast not long ago. Like, the coolest thing now at this point isn't what I'm gonna do for me myself.
Mhm.
It is, like, the we before me, and then watching somebody else realize something as you, like, taught them to fish,
Yeah. Well,
right?
it's probably like mothers, like, that's motherhood, right?
Yeah.
Like, when your kid finally does the thing you've been trying to teach them for so long, you're like, "Oh, they got it. Alright, good."
Right.
Like, there's the hit. Okay, I can go on to the next one.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the
Well,
same thing with clients, right? Not
yeah.
that they're children, but you know what I mean.
Well, no, but they're definitely, I think, sometimes you have to, it's like a cake you put in the oven and then you bake
Yeah.
it for like 21 years, and then you're like,
And hopefully
"Oh,
it's good.
okay, hopefully this, like,
Yeah.
worked out in the end," right? Like,
Yeah.
hopefully you're getting these little nuggets and morsels that
Yep.
I'm trying to, send to you, and then when you watch it happen, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I was a small part of that."
Yeah.
Like, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
And like, majority of my clients are, like, 50 and up. They're either in retirement or nearing retirement, but I'm starting to, like, be a mother duck to other, like, people in their 30s or even in their 20s because those that I feel like are like-minded can handle that delayed gratification, and
Yep.
they've got these big goals, and they wanna hit them, and I was like, "Gosh, if I can be there at the start, like, that's cool."
Well, and you have such a huge opportunity when you look at year over year,
Mhm.
just doing small things on a monthly
Yeah.
basis and how that compounds.
Yep.
We were really blessed in that we, learned that really early on and didn't get into debt and didn't do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But now my kids are super,
Yeah.
excited. They're like, "Well, if I put away $10,000 now," I'm like, "Do you have $10,000?" They're like, "Well, no, but if I
If I
did,
yeah, right.
then what would that be worth in XYZ
Yeah.
or PYQ?" And watching them look at, well, wait a second, what is an interest rate on a house? And why would that be that way? And what's the difference between somebody being at 3% and 6%?
Yeah.
And I just think it's such a valuable education to get early on.
Oh, for
And,
sure.
and if people are honest
Yeah.
with you about what it all looks like, it's so possible
Mhm. And
to
that's
shift it.
like and I think that for some people, and I feel like it might be in their 20s and 30s, they look at, like, investing or retirement planning as, like, something that's exclusive, right? I have to have X amount of dollars,
Mhm.
$10,000, whatever, before I can start investing. I'm like, "No, no, no. Put that money away now."
Yep.
Like, it will build. You will get wealth. You gotta start small, and that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. You just have to start.
So if people want to get in touch with you
Yeah.
and want to have more of a personalized investment plan and conversation about their finances, how do they do that?
They can go to our website, strategicfg.net. They can look up Strategic Financial Group. Just give us a call, and we'll set up a phone call and just see if we're a good fit for each other. And yeah, we'll go
I
from there.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I think that people really deserve to have the kind of heart center around their money.
Yeah.
I think it's something that can be an incredible blessing or fear induced.
Mhm.
And I just want to honor you for the way that you approach this
Thank you.
and the heart center that comes behind it. I feel like you could do anything. Like you could sell like freezers someplace and it would still be like
I think you
covered by the Holy Spirit.
I think you told my parents that you wanted me. It's like, I'm gonna hire her to sell houses.
I know.
Like
I know. I always have this thought because I was hired while I was waiting a table, that I want to someday hire a server to come and, work inside of our
Yeah.
brokerage. And we do have one that's amazing that is a server that's at our brokerage. But I just think that when you have the right heart center and you're working to be Christ's hands to serve,
Mhm.
I'm not sure it would really matter like where you put us.
Yeah.
It's the intention and the you before me,
Mhm.
feeling that comes inside of it that just makes it all be blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what
Yep.
I see about you, like, right from the
Thank
very
you.
beginning. I've actually called your parents and told them, like, what an amazing daughter they've raised, and I hope that my
Thanks,
children turn
Megan.
out as well.
Oh gosh. Thank you.
I just think the world of you, and
Oh, thank you.
you're so smart, and you know exactly what you're doing, but, the person, the heart center, and the constant striving and wanting, to do what's right and to do what's
I
best and to let other people get what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
thank you, sweet friend. Thank you, sweet, smart
Thank you.
friend.
You too.
This is Megan Heritage with Positivity in Practice, and today we were here with Stephanie Greene. Thank you.